special guest this evening is Captain Henry Kroll. And Captain Henry Kroll is an adventurer, aviator, miner, commercial fisherman, inventor, entrepreneur, and outstanding writer. Henry has authored several books available on Amazon.com, one of which is Cosmological Ice Ages. His websites are guarddogbooks.com and alaskapublishing.com. And welcome, Captain Henry Kroll, to the show this evening. Hi there.
Yeah, thank you, Solaris. Thank you for having me on. Greetings to all you folks out there listening. Yeah, HankKroll.com is one of my websites. It links to the other one,
Nice.
HankKroll.
Okay, I didn't put that one in there, so I'll put it in the chat. So it's HankKroll.com.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Good. So what's going on?
Well, a lot of things are going on. Winter's coming on here, and we're getting ready for winter. And we got to winterize our house. And we're thinking of driving down to Seattle and then to Nevada, Reno, Nevada area. I've got some medical problems I'd like to get taken care of. And soak in a hot springs down there for a couple months, and it purges all the toxins out of your body. But anyway, I'd like to talk about the climate a little bit and just temperatures in general. I've got some recent information, and one of my Facebook friends, Rose Belizia, wanted me to talk about oil drilling in the Arctic and the release of methane. Well, there isn't much that humans can do to modify the climate. I'm convinced that our government, a lot of this propaganda that they're putting forth is bogus, because we got underlying volcanoes and other things that modify the weather much more than humans can do. Their theories are based on the butterfly theory, where if you go back in time and you accidentally step on an insect or a butterfly, that you teleport back to the future, everything's going to be different. Everything will look strange, the donuts will be falling from the sky like in Homer Simpson or whatever.
Yeah.
But, that's not a reality. The thing is, if we don't drill in the Arctic, of course, Russia, Finland, Germany, Norway, and China will be drilling up there anyway. You see, the nations of the world don't cover the entire ocean out. They only claim out to 200 miles, and they're preparing for less ice in the Arctic, in the northern part of the globe, but it may or may not occur. 3 years ago, there was more ice up there than they've ever had in a long time. And remember, Nome, Alaska ran out of fuel, and they couldn't get a tanker in there to give them diesel fuel to heat their homes for the winter. They were desperate, and we only had one icebreaker, and it wasn't capable of breaking ice to get a tanker in there. So Russia helped us out. They had one of their super icebreakers break a path so that one of our smaller oil tankers could get in there and deliver fuel to Nome. And they really had a tough time of it. It took them weeks to get through all the ice. When they finally got there, they couldn't get close enough to shore to rig up hoses and stuff for quite some time. They had to jury rig everything, and they eventually managed to pump off some of their oil to keep them supplied for the winter up there. But, Alaska's pipeline is running dry. It's running less than a quarter capacity, and they may have to shut it down. And that's their main revenue up here, is that Trans-Alaska Pipeline. As far as methane release up there, if it gets colder, it won't be released, obviously.
Right.
And if it does, there isn't anything we can do about it. There just happens to be more methane on the bottoms of the oceans. That's what we should be worrying about, but there isn't anything we can do about that either, because the oceans are regulated by mid-ocean rifts and undersea, more than millions of undersea volcanoes. We got more than 1 million undersea volcanoes along the Ring of Fire. And we think that they're actually heating the oceans. And anyway, I believe I sent you some emails from NOAA.gov about tide levels, sea levels. And apparently, if you go on the actual government website and look at that, this area here, the sea levels are falling 3.5 feet in 100 years projected. And also on Kodiak Island, it's the same, about 3.4 feet projected they're going to fall. And they have been falling. And they have tide measuring stations in Seldovia and Nikiski and Kodiak, and they've been measuring the tide levels daily since 1971. So anyway, the sea levels aren't rising. There's no worry there. So a friend of
Mhm.
mine, he's a electrical engineer, and he's a pretty smart guy. I gave him those websites, and he was astounded to hear that the propaganda they're feeding us is all wrong. So he started looking around on the government websites, the NOAA websites, and they found a way to get into other countries. And we looked at New Zealand and Australia and Norway and Finland and all the northern areas and some of the extreme southern areas. All the sea levels are falling.
Mhm.
However, near the equators, and they are rising slightly. Well, we don't know why, but my theory is on the subject is this El Nino, which we're not sure what causes it. It warms the seawater, and it's probably due to all the undersea volcanoes. Water expands slightly, so you're going to get a few millimeters of sea level rise within a year or two of this El Nino, and afterwards, after it cools off, it'll probably go back down again. Of course, the Earth rotates, and you get centrifugal force, so the sea levels may rise more at the equator, and it all depends on the moon's gravity and
Mhm.
other factors, and also maybe even some planets. You see that
Right. Well,
when
what
a
about
lot.
magnetic north, Henry? What about the magnetic north moving towards Siberia? Does that have anything to do with this, the water levels?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I've got maps of the actual magnetic pole. It was originally up there around quite a bit further south. It is moving around 60 kilometers a year toward the actual rotational pole,
Mhm.
and we'll pass it in a few decades and then head over toward Russia. That's what they predict. And as it gets closer to the actual rotational pole of the Earth, then the magnetic fields of the Earth seems to weaken, which could be dangerous for us because in the cosmic rays, space radiation could possibly be increased and alter DNA of plants and animals.
Mhm.
And this has happened before. They've looked at volcanic eruptions, layers of volcanic material in California and all over, and they lay a compass on these ancient lava beds, which contain iron, and they can tell approximately what the old magnetic pole direction was, you see.
Mhm.
But anyway, I got some new information here on sea ice. I just got it on the web. It's Arctic sea ice at the South Pole. You go on National Geographic, you can see whenever they build a research station, they build it on top of 20-foot high pipe platforms, as high as they can get it. And then after 5 years, they have to tunnel down to get in the front door. It's snow and ice. Ice is building at the South Pole 5 feet a year.
Mhm.
What that means is in 100 years, you could have 500 feet of ice there, In
Right.
200 years, you could have a mile deep more sheet of ice on Antarctica. And sea ice is building down there. That's what this headline is. It's by Jason Samernoff, September 23rd, 2013. It's released here. This is a couple of years ago, I guess. Antarctic sea ice extend on September 22nd compared to 1981 to 2010. It's tremendous amount of sea ice at that time was building up. It's hundreds of miles offshore, all the way around the continent of Antarctica. It's just an amazing map that they have on that website. And there's 19.5 million square kilometers more sea ice at that time from the
Mhm.
National Snow and Ice Data Center website. The number of bested record high sea levels set earlier this month in 2012 and was 19.48 million square kilometers. Well, it's up to this more than that, actually, and increasing ice is especially perplexing since the water beneath the ice is warmed slightly and not cooled.
Mhm.
The overwhelming evidence is that the Southern Ocean is warming, says Jinlin Zhuang, University of Washington scientist studying Antarctic ice. Why would sea ice be increasing? Though the
Mhm.
rate of increase is small, it's a puzzle to scientists. Occasionally, we have cold winters up here too, but my experience is after looking at average global temperatures over a long period of time, you can type that into Google, and you'll see actual temperature graphs dating back hundreds of years. And you go back to whenever there's a major volcanic eruption in Iceland or Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, or a supervolcano goes off, it lowers global temperatures several degrees. What it does, it releases tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide, which our scientists say is a greenhouse gas, but also has pumps volcanic ash into the stratosphere and blocks sunlight, and the whole Earth cools. You see.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was born in Seldovia, Alaska, and the winters are extremely cold there. When I was a kid, prior to 2 years before I was born in 1942, the fishing boats froze to the bottom of the slough. There was no harbor at the time, and you kept your boat in this brackish water slough, tied to a dock or just moored out there, and the tide would come in and out. And the tide came over all the boats and swamped the old gas engines and stuff. They were seiners, and they had seines, and they pulled by hand. They had nets that they pulled by hand. And one Mormon friend of my dad, he's an enterprising man, he went out with a garden hose, and he covered his whole boat with ice. It was way below zero temperatures. He just went out there and sprayed fresh water on everything. The tide came over it and it didn't swamp it, It didn't hurt the engines.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, the name of his boat was a Sea Scout, and he was one of my father's best friends, a good friend of our family.
Nice.
When we were growing up there years ago. He passed away a few years ago, but his son is still around down there in Squim, Washington area.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, this polar vortex, it just gets really cold on the South Pole, and it's building ice down there a lot. So your average global temperature is still hovering around 32 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the temperature measuring stations in the outlying areas have been shut down by our government because they claim they don't have the funding to monitor all of this stuff. So, what we're getting is the temperature stations near the cities where you have a lot of asphalt and heat from buildings and, automobiles and traffic and, civilization. So you're getting false readings there. You just can't believe everything you hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's
exactly.
crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's interesting that they say they don't have enough money. That's very interesting to me, isn't it?
Well, they're not managing the money. Now, I urge everyone to go on YouTube and type in Argentina. There's a 7-minute long video that will explain what they did down there and how Juan Perón and the fellow, the dictator before him, ruined that country with their ideas. The zealots, they're what causes a lot of the strife in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Over in Cambodia, they put millions of people in the rice fields, and millions of people died because of Pol Pot over there. Gandhi, everyone thinks he's a wonderful peacekeeper. He was a lawyer, educated lawyer, Harvard in England, and he went over to India and became ruler of India, and he kept the technology away from the population over there. They could use steam and horses and draft animals, but he actually kept the country back 50 to 100 years in technology.
Wow.
But, we don't know if it's just makes it rough for the people. They can't get ahead,
Oh, exactly.
They can't actually have very good lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going in reverse.
Yeah, I don't know what the best governmental system in the world is, but obviously it's not socialism, and it's not the democratic agenda that they're putting forth in America. We're going the way of Argentina right now. We're going to have inflation they're going to have to print more money to pay their bills is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, let's get back to actual climate and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Most of you are sitting in a room at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and most people don't realize you're living in a sea of particles. If you didn't have that, you would be cold. You've got these air molecules that are vibrating around you, and each one, every time they bump into another one, they give off an infrared photon, and they transmit these infrared photons back and forth. That's what heat is these invisible particles, infrared photons, or waves and particles both, depending on how you look at them.
Mm-hmm.
It can be either one, depending on your, train of thought at this particular time. But infrared photons are heat, So how cold is space?
Mm-hmm.
Well, minus 55 degrees Fahrenheit between the planets is empty space. Yet it can be more than 1,000 degrees, or even millions of degrees in the atmosphere between stars. And also, in the sunny side of our planet, if you're out there in orbit around Earth, temperatures can be as much as 250 degrees in the sunlight, and maybe minus 156 degrees in the shade around our own planet. So you can take a reflector and collect sunlight up there that's, say, 8 to 1 or 10 to 1, you'd have 2,500 degree temperatures with a parabolic reflector reflecting sunlight onto a collector that would produce steam for generating electricity and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We live in this sea of particles, but
very true.
I was researching this absolute zero, and they've got some new states of matter that are appearing when they reduce temperatures down to absolute zero, and they've got some experiments that are coming up in 2016 where they have a device they're putting up on the space station to create temperatures within a millionth of a degree, a few millionths of a degree above 0 Kelvin, which is absolute zero, where atoms arrange themselves in layers, creating these new forms of matter that are essentially quantum in nature.
Mm-hmm.
In such physical states, time and space may not exist.
Right. That makes sense.
Such experiments may lead to atomic lasers and time travel.
Mm-hmm.
The human eye sees the light in the range of about 2 to 3 electron volts. And the launch of this Fermi high-energy photon satellite in June of 2008 has detected over 500 very mysterious high-energy light sources. Fermi can detect such high-energy light between 20 million and 100 billion electron volts. And some of these unknown sources of light are pulsars. They're possibly alien space navigation buoys or beacons. That's what I call them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They pulse at such regular intervals that if you just take an optical device that can look at several pulsars at once and measure the pulses and the angles of those stars, if you know where they are, you can determine your position in space within a few inches or feet, because the pulses are high frequency and so regular. They're compared to an atomic clock in regularity.
Mm-hmm. Do they have a rhythm or a pulse to them, Henry?
Pardon?
Do they have a pulse or a type of rhythm to them?
Yeah, pulsars. They're like the ticking of a watch, but some of them are very high frequency and some are low frequency, depending which ones they are in different directions. So you can use them as navigation buoys if you know how. In fact, they might even be, as far as we know, creations created by aliens to use as navigation buoys in space. We haven't got a clue, really. This Fermi satellite can detect such high-energy light sources between 20 million and 100 billion electron volts, and some of these pulsars have extremely accurate pulse repetition rates.
Mm-hmm.
So I just reiterating that. When I was writing this Cosmological Ice Ages over 10 years ago, my co-author Brad Guth discovered that this Team Hubble had calculated the mass of a photon of 5.98 E minus 66 grams.
Mm-hmm.
They also said that there are 1 E100 of these photons per atom in the universe. So photons are very numerous, and that's what keeps us warm and comfortable and heats our house. And these infrared photons, they kind of make the molecules vibrate.
Mm-hmm.
The radiation, actually,
right.
the form of it, a low-frequency radiation. And these dark matter is about 20% of the universe, so and dark energy, they say, is 78% of the universe. That leaves about 2% for visible matter that we call reality. That's what we've come up with so far. They don't know what all this dark matter and dark energy is.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think it could be photons that are at rest after traveling 14 or more billion light years.
Mm-hmm.
This dark energy, because they do have mass. After this Hubble revelation, where they say that a photon has 5.98 minus 66 grams of mass, that means that one day I multiplied 1e100 of them per atom, multiplied the two numbers together, just simply subtract 66 from 100, you get 5.98 E34 grams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anyone can do that. I did it in my head, so you know there has more photons per atom than there are entire mass of our solar system. That's how big a number of photons there are.
Wow.
Because our solar system is 2e30 kilograms. So, you know, God greatly favored the photon, which is light, you know,
I
that
love
keeps us
photons.
warm. He said, let there be light, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Intelligent energy, no doubt. Well, to me, matter is just another form of energy anyway. So it's all about energy. And if you want to get esoteric, it can be about consciousness too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we're getting all ready to leave here. My dinner consisted of 3 dog biscuits.
What?
My wife makes these delicious dog biscuits, and I like them better than the dog. She
Oh,
put
funny.
brewer's yeast and bone meal and garlic powder and
Uh-huh.
whole wheat. And I got her a grinder, and she ground up some real whole wheat. Man, those are good. The best
Wow.
cookies I've ever ate.
I bet my dog would like that. That's
Yeah,
funny.
she gets mad at me, the dog does, whenever I eat her biscuits. But
Uh-oh.
I have to share with her.
Oh, that's funny. Wow.
Black,
Well, it sounds like you've been
black
doing.
lab, she glares at me.
That's funny. It sounds like you're doing a lot of research. There's no doubt about that. Been busy, huh?
Well, sort of. I'm just working around here.
Well, it's interesting information you just read off right there, and I do kind of resonate with those alien space navigation buoys. I like that concept. That really rings
Well,
true.
we're convinced that's probably, they could be used as that if they weren't created by aliens, but
Right.
and they're very accurate. I mean, the pulse repetition rate is more accurate than anything we can produce, even. You see,
Mm-hmm.
I used to use Loran on the boat, and they have Loran stations in specific areas. They had one on Kodiak Island, south of Kodiak City on Narrow Cape, and another one in Glen Allen. And they have a pulse repetition rate in the base signal. That both of the stations put out a signal at the same time, and it's a pulse repetition rate, and that would vary depending on wherever your position is. And these instruments pick it up and determine where your location is.
Mm-hmm.
When I've crossed the Gulf of Alaska with larger boats, the original Lorans were very primitive. We had 5 or 6 knobs with numbers on them, and then we had an oscilloscope. You tuned in the station, the Loran station, you got a blip on the oscilloscope, and then you adjusted these 2 pulse repetition rates from 2 different stations to where the 2 blips line up, and then you read the numbers that on the dials, and then you took those numbers and you moved them over to your marine chart, which had the Loran coordinates written on the charts in lines, the pulse repetition lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they came out with computers that did all that for you, it was much easier.
Right. Yeah.
I would,
Well, it's good to use your brain, anyways. Nonetheless.
well, I
old
did that
school.
for many, many years, and I got so that I could just look at these 2 numbers, like in that crazy movie, and determine which ones were increasing, which ones were decreasing, and then navigate the vessel to that particular set of numbers where I'd left a bunch of crab pots, or left the end of the string anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty interesting.
Anyway, uh, I've got some more information here on the Watchers. They're found in Genesis, the fallen angels.
Mm-hmm.
They're called the Son of God uh, in Genesis. It's been suggested that by several researchers that this generation between the angels and the men is the true origin of the bloodline of the biblical patriarchs, and therefore the true origin of the Grail bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, in the book of Enoch, Noah is an ancestor of Christ, is portrayed as having been one of the offspring of the Watchers. In the account where Noah is born, he is described as a child of the flesh, which was white as snow and red as rose, the hair of whose head was illuminated all the house. He was like a very light blonde with white skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sun, the whole house abounded with light. According to the Bible, Noah lived 986 years. So a biological bloodline from the fallen angels falling from the heaven, according to the medieval poet Wolfram von Eckenbach, description of the Grail is being not of a cup, but a stone that fell from heaven, literally a jewel knocked from Lucifer's crown during the rebellion that descended to earth. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think it is a cup, the Grail.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be of high technology or origin,
Right.
You could take colloidal silver. It heals a lot of things. It kills more than 650 bacteria. We thought that at one time you just could make these Grail cups. You put a 9-volt battery in the bottom of it, and you have silver wires embedded in the side of the cup. You fill it with water. It would produce colloidal silver.
Mm-hmm.
Within about 15, 20 minutes, and you drink the stuff, or you could put it on wounds to make them heal, or on your eyes, or all sorts of uses for the thing. And, when you're just drink the water that's in the cup after about 15 minutes, and you get a good dose of colloidal silver.
Mm-hmm.
You could make these Grails, I should have patented that idea. I'm giving it away for free now.
Well, you're helping a lot of people nonetheless. And of course, that's in your book, right?
No, I didn't have that in there at all.
What about the Philosopher's Stone? You didn't put it in there?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's an interdimensional
Mm-hmm.
substance that I discovered over many, many years of research, about 15 years. I was doing tests on gold ores and trying to figure out matter itself and why we weren't getting any recovery from these complex ores, because they're bound up with other weird substances. And over time, I came across a book in a Montana bookstore in Bozeman. I just walked in there and opened this giant book. And there's a picture of where I live in Tuxedni Bay, Alaska, of Fossil Point, right across the bay from where I live. So naturally, I had to buy the book for $75. I got out of there. It's 4 inches thick and 8 by 10, huge volume produced by the government in 1898. It's a mineral resources of the western United States and Alaska, including coal and other things that was put together in 1898. They wanted to develop these resources. And from that book, I read accounts of where they were mining gold in Bend, in Oregon, and using potash and lye and other things to get the platinum out of the grains of sand on the beach at Bandon and Gold Beach, Oregon. And from that idea, of course, I realized you could dissolve these minerals in alkaline solutions, including gold. And that's how plants take the minerals out of soil. They extrude alkaline to the roots.
Mm-hmm.
See, everything you eat that's green comes from the soil, but the plants are able to take it up into their systems, xylem and phloem, using alkaline that they extrude from their roots. And the reason you can eat most of these food that we do eat is it's been genetically altered to have a lower alkaline content. It doesn't grow quite as well as natural plants. Most of your natural growing plants are poison because they have a high alkaline content. That's what poison is alkaline. it can burn your mouth if it gets strong enough. So anyway, apparently these patriarchs, Moses and the priests and the pharaohs, they could produce this food by bypassing the plant. They were smart enough. They didn't have to have the plant take the minerals out of the soil. A lot of those springs in the Middle East are highly alkaline. You can't hardly drink the water, barely. And the soil used to be an ocean at one time, so all your trace minerals are in the soil, including the horribly rearranged atoms, or two atoms combined. They're in these soils in high concentration amounts, so they boil the dirt in this spring water for up to 5 days. And of course, they have to keep adding water because it boils away. So the alkaline becomes extremely strong. It's a deadly poison.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after 5 days, they could pour this clear liquid out, and it's clear. You can't see anything in it. And they could add a vinegar or an acid to that of some kind, maybe wine, and it neutralizes the acid, bring it down to where they could drink that, and it becomes a milk. All the atoms then become visible in a solution that looks like a white milk.
Mm-hmm.
And they could drink that. That was taking God's inner light into your body. And they could dry that out and filter it with fine Muslim cloths, and they carried it in the Ark of the Covenant. From what information we could gather, is this is what the mineral supplement that they could add to their bread. It had all the trace minerals of the area that are in the soils in it, and it's a high concentration of actually orms and trace minerals, both,
Mm-hmm.
which is very beneficial for your DNA to replicate your cells in your body.
Yeah,
And
people could live off of that pretty much.
I believe Moses fed this to his children. It's written in Exodus, that they gave them the mineral supplement from the ark, and they put it in their priest bread, and only the priest got the priest bread usually, but he had to feed it to the Hebrew children. And he walked the old folks around out there for 40 years until they died off. This is to indoctrinate them into the monotheism, the one God. So the actual religion lasted a very long time because he was able to kill off the other people that had these other religions.
Mm-hmm.
And one time when he came down from Mount Sinai, his brother Moses had actually participated in creating a golden calf, and Moses was really mad. God was, he'd been up there for a long time. He was hungry, and 30 days, I guess, he was up there for a while and didn't have much to eat or something. But anyway, he comes down there. He's very, very angry. He was ready to kill everybody, and he told Moses to a Bezalel, his metalsmith. He was a young man, actually, but they had learned in the craft. He was quite young. I think he was like 16 or 18 years old, and told him to burn that golden idol into the white powder and throw it in the creek and make the Hebrew children drink thereof, which they did. So that tells you right there, they could turn that gold into this white powder.
Right.
According to David Hudson and other scientists that have studied this, at 2,800 degrees, it will turn into a white powder. Well, it's very difficult to reach those temperatures with ordinary forges, but in an electric arc, it's quite feasible to do. I've since learned that you can take an ordinary stun gun and hold it on a gold nugget, and it'll reduce it into a white powder.
Right. Well,
but you can order the stuff off the internet. You can get it from other sources. People are making it in their kitchen, and I put the recipes in my book, Philosopher's Stone, that I got from Pfizer Pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm.
There's 6 recipes to take it out of sources that have a high content of ormus gold and platinum group metals. There's seawater, Dead Sea salt, sea salt, Great Salt Lake precipitate, and limestone. Anything that's grown in the sea, of course, would have a lot of your trace minerals and the orms. It's an interesting science, it's an interdimensional particle.
It's alchemy at its highest.
The more you eat, the more your body will actually glow, and this could be one of the ways that Jesus was able to cure people and translocate and do some of the things that they talked about in the Bible. A lot of people were experimenting with this in Egypt while he was over there at that time, and it's possible that they had this technology quite some time. He learned it from the Egyptians, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
From what I hear, he also spent quite a long time in India prior to the time he came back to Israel there and was kicking the money changers out of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
The whole early part of his life is not talked about in the Bible, but according to people, there's a lot of books in India that talk about his earlier life. So he must have been over there.
Right. Well, it's all about alchemy, if you ask me, and frequency and modulation of frequencies, altering not only DNA but also metals, precious metals.
It is sort of an alchemy. It's like magic, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not. It's not really once you understand this stuff.
Right.
You see, you take two gold atoms, you combine all the protons in the center, and they're like little magnets of the same polarity, so they push apart. This allows the nucleus to be quite large, maybe 10 or 100 times larger than a normal atom. Then the electrons pair up in a ring, and they tend to Cooper pair, depending on the number of electrons or their charge, basically the charge. It can either be like a Saturn or a galaxy or more like a cone-shaped. But anyway, our bodies, the human bodies, I believe, the mitochondria within our bodies, are actually able to transmute these atoms into the proper elements simply by pulling the protons out of there. See, when you've got double the number and they're further apart, you have weak atomic forces. And if you subject this material as a white powder to direct sunlight, it will catch fire and burn. It's like a metallic burn,
Mm-hmm.
like lighting a piece of magnesium strip or something like that. It would be, gives off beta radiation, and they found that out in some of their experiments. David Hudson, when he was first playing around with this stuff, Phoenix, Arizona, they caught it on fire accidentally in laboratory. The sunlight was shining on it. Noticed that his beakers and things that were laying next to it were burnt from the radiation, the beta radiation.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty wild.
But anyway, it has weak atomic forces, and this allows our bodies to make proper elements for us cellularly, so you don't lose your telomeres, and you have more energy within the cells, so your DNA is wound up tighter, and your cells will live longer.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why we age is the DNA tends to unwind, and it becomes looser, and then you start, losing your body cells because they're not replicated properly. That's what aging is loss of body cells.
Mm-hmm.
You have to replicate 6 million cells every second. It's about 3 billion every minute in order to maintain your present form. And in order to do it properly so you don't age, you have to wind up the DNA, and that requires a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy for all these millions of cells to divide, Every second was like 6 million of them.
Right.
So where does that energy come from? You gotta eat good food, to produce. You gotta feed the mitochondria within our bodies.
Right.
And that's what I believe these worms do. They can help you correct the DNA, cure cancer and all diseases, and wind it up tighter.
Right.
When you're first born, you come out into the open air there, you have about 25 base pairs per turn. You see, your DNA is a double-stranded helix. If you can unwind it and stretch it out, they say it's 6 feet long. But you got 3 billion RNA DNA sequences, and it's wound up with 300,000 revolutions. And then the tighter it's wound, the more base pairs you have per revolution. And you get 50 base pairs at conception, the egg multiplies very fast, extremely fast. But after you're born, it slows down to about 25 base pairs per turn. And when you reach age 50, you have about 5 base pairs per turn, and you don't heal as fast. Your cell reproduction rate slows way down. You start aging more and more and more. So the only way to stop it is you got to feed the mitochondria, wind the DNA back up again, and that's what Ormus does. It's material that the mitochondria can make the proper elements out of. You got to feed the factory there that produces the.
Right.
Yeah, our doctors and our scientists, they don't seem to get a lot of this stuff.
No. And another thing too, Henry, it seems like we're energy beings to begin with. I mean, we are conduits of energy. And I think with that, not only does that come into view, but also just being connected to higher frequencies and higher states of consciousness, I would suspect would help people evolve and actually maintain a more youthful look.
Oh, yeah, it requires a lot of energy. Now, I've discovered in my own body, I quit eating eggs about a year ago, maybe 8 months ago, and my arthritis is really kicking in, man. I got to do something about it. So I started eating eggs again.
Oh, yeah?
Or, you can't worry about that cholesterol. That's another myth. You got to have the energy, and you got to eat more eggs. At least 2 a day, I guess.
Do you do organic out there?
Yeah, as much as possible. We eat a lot of salmon. We fish salmon for a living.
I love salmon.
You saw a video of my wife throwing salmon on my YouTube page, right? That was cute.
Yeah, that was. I did see that. That's hard work.
Yeah, it is. And she got over 60,000 pounds last summer, her and my son, Bill. He's a big guy out of the Army. He's 39 years old, been in the Army most of his life. But his first year, he really fished and worked hard, and we had to get him to pick fish faster out of the nets, But they got a little over 60,000 pounds.
Wow.
There was 33,000 pounds of those were sockeye salmon or red salmon. That's what we call them here. But
good stuff.
Anyway, they had a really good year, and I made a little money myself running the tender boat. And I pick up their fish and iced them very thoroughly and try to do a good job. I pick up from other fishermen and also some of the drift fleet. They show up over there on the west side of the inlet. They need tenders. The company I work for, they don't pay me wages. I get paid by the poundage that I bring in, and they give me a fuel allotment of $500 per trip. Now, Cook Inlet is about 55 miles across, and at 10 knots, it takes me 5 hours to get across there, a little over sometimes. I can make it in 4 hours and 40 minutes with the tide. If I catch the tide right, I can do as much as 14 knots. But usually I'm doing about 8.7 knots or something like that, nautical miles. And it takes 5 hours one way. Well, I figured it out this year that I've made over 2,000 trips across Cook Inlet since 1964.
Wow.
That's insane. It's 50-mile trips at 10 knots or 10 miles an hour. That's like very, very boring.
My goodness. Yeah, but I bet it's beautiful nonetheless, right?
I make about 20 to 22, 26 trips across Cook Inlet every summer, and and back again. They're round trips, so it's actually 40 one-way trips or 44 for 22. So it's I like the country. Some years some days it's quite rough on the inlet. It's a lot of tide drips and that sort of thing. But this summer we had really good weather. Only got about 2 or 3 rough trips where we got tossed around quite a bit in the middle tide rip there.
Right. Do you ever just kind of watch the night skies with a telescope? Do you ever have that opportunity when you're, on the ocean?
Oh, yeah, somewhat. I've taken some pictures of the whatever phenomena I can find, but right here where I live, I got a good view of the night sky to the south. I can see Orion and Sirius here pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're heading towards Sirius at 7.5 kilometers per second, and it's 8 light years away.
Mm-hmm.
And Orion, of course, is a dust cloud over there. There's thousands of stars in that cluster, many thousands, and lots of dirt and dust over there. And apparently the stars are born in that area. That's a birthplace of suns,
Right. I remember you
what
mentioning that you suspected that our sun was connected to Orion.
I was curious, where we came from, and what are we doing here? Where are we going? Basic
Right.
stuff. And I came across some data in my computer, in my encyclopedias there, Britannica, a huge set that my mother had purchased, and where Campbell and Moore, these two astronomers, tallied up the redshift of 2,149 nearby stars, bright ones, and they put it into a computer and determined they were heading toward Hercules at 19.5 kilometers a second, our whole solar system. Well, I ran a line backwards since I like to pilot boats and planes. I fly. So I ran a line backwards through a regular star chart, and it's a straight line, and extended it out, and it comes pretty close to Orion.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everything is curved in space because you're in a galaxy that's rotating. So, Orion is a birthplace of stars, and it's the nearest one to us, and we're leaving the area at 19.5 kilometers per second. So my logic tells us we're born in Orion.
Mm-hmm.
What this means is what we perceive to be real around us, everything, the dust and the elements, basic elements, most of that came out of Orion. Some of it was just collected randomly from space, from incoming debris, but our reality, most of it came out of Orion. We do have other stars like our sun that are exact same size and the same elements, and they are ahead of us 50 light years. And they are the Big Dipper stars. Ursa Major and Minor, and there's
Mm-hmm.
they're just 50 to 75 light years away from us. They're kind of like shotgun pellets. They are born in these birthplaces, and then they drift out of there slowly. And every time something explodes over there in Orion or in these birthplaces, they get kicked out a little faster.
Right.
So apparently we were born in Orion, and if you go back to the geologic history of Earth, I've had a lot of geology in college, so anyway, Earth froze up for 1 billion years. It's known as the Huronian glaciation. The whole Earth was covered with ice for a long, long time. It had one continent, one ocean, had mile-deep sheet of ice over that single ocean. Maybe the only life on there was around volcanoes or under the ice someplace. There's no way to tell. But this is based on rocks around Lake Huron and in Australia, this Huronian glaciation rocks. You see, they're very, very old.
Mm-hmm.
They can somehow date when they were glaciated and carved out by huge miles deep sheets of ice. So anyway, after we drifted out of there, there's no way to get life started on this planet. So Procyon and Sirius, they're not even from this galaxy because they got weird elements. They have a titanium atmosphere around Sirius, and both of them have white dwarfs that orbit around them quite close. And that is very anomalous also because, to make a white dwarf, a star has to be at least 6 solar masses, maybe 60 solar masses, and then it explodes and shrinks down into a white dwarf, and when that happens, it annihilates solar systems out to about 60 light years away. And the explosion is tremendous. And you take a 60 solar mass star and you shrink it down to 1.5 solar masses, you're going to have like 45 or 49 or solar masses of iron and nickel and other debris scattered throughout space around it, and so it creates all these meteorites. So this happened before we were near these stars. They were swapped in by our galaxy. Our galaxy, they say, according to Astronomy Magazine, is eaten up at least 10 major-sized galaxies, other ones, huge ones, and over 100,000 smaller star clusters, and some of those star clusters probably had thousands of stars in them. So it gobbled up Procyon and Sirius somewhere as we were leaving Orion. We got near these two stars, and both of them orbit each other very, very slowly. Harold Shapley of the observatory in England over there determined that in one of his books. I read one of his books on it. Anyway, these white dwarfs of Sirius B, it has more gravity than our solar system. But it's the size of Earth, if you can imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little object, the size, they're a little bigger than Earth. Orbit Sirius A at 54-year orbit period. But 8 AU to 12 AU, it's elliptical orbit. 1 AU meaning 1 Earth distance between the Earth and the Sun. So at 8 AU, being that it's 1.5 solar masses, being that close to this big gaseous star, which is 2 solar masses, it could actually feed off on Sirius A.
Mm-hmm.
And according to this guy from India, whose specialty was white dwarfs, is Chandrankar, Samarayani Chandrankar, his says when these white dwarfs reach 1.5 solar masses, that's the Chandrankar limit, they can explode down into a neutron star.
Mm-hmm.
So we could be annihilated any second if Sirius B decides to explode, then we wouldn't be here.
Oh, boy.
However, it is probably the object that created life on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Sirius B?
Because Earth had a very high pressure atmosphere, and you would never see the sun, and the sun didn't burn very hot when we got captured back in the Cambrian era by this. We matched Sirius B's speed orbiting around Sirius A, 54-year orbit, so it takes a while. And we slowly were drug in there like a little tractor beam, put us into orbit around a tight orbit, about a tenth of a light year or less, 50th of a light year. And the light from Sirius A is 4 times that of our sun, but that still probably couldn't penetrate our atmosphere. But the light from Sirius B is anywhere from 100 to maybe more, like 1,000 times of UV light, ultraviolet light of our sun.